Welcome to our deep dive into Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature. Um, Over the next three parts, we're going to be exploring those sort of like hidden forces that drive our actions. And we're hoping to uncover some practical knowledge along the way to help you navigate all those, complex human interactions. I think you'll agree that it's not about judging others,
Right.
but it's more about gaining that deeper understanding of
Yeah,
ourselves.
exactly. And the people around us. It's about cultivating greater self-awareness
Yeah.
and using that knowledge to build stronger, more authentic relationships.
Okay. Let's unpack one of the most intriguing concepts in the book, the shadow. Greene describes this as the hidden, less flattering side of our personality that we often repress.
It's important to remember that the shadow isn't some separate entity, it's a part of us. It's those aspects we deem unacceptable or undesirable, so we try to keep them hidden, even from ourselves. But under stress or insecurity, the shadow can emerge in unexpected ways.
So someone known for being overly empathetic might actually be masking deep-seated insecurities. That almost feels counterintuitive.
Exactly. Greene highlights this paradox. Think of those seemingly perfect individuals who go above and beyond with kindness. Their exaggerated empathy might be a way to compensate for a fragile sense of self-worth.
Interesting. I'm starting to see how this could be useful in understanding people's true motivations. What are some other signs that the shadow might be surfacing?
Look for contradictory behavior. That sudden burst of anger from an unusually nice person, that could be the shadow leaking out. Or imagine someone who prides themselves on being rational but suddenly makes an impulsive decision. Those moments when someone's carefully constructed persona cracks can be incredibly revealing.
So it's about paying attention to those inconsistencies, those moments when someone's words don't quite align with their actions. That can give us a glimpse into their true nature, especially under pressure.
Precisely. Now let's move beyond the shadow and explore how we communicate on a subconscious level through nonverbal cues.
This is where things get really interesting for me. Greene argues that we're constantly sending and receiving signals without even realizing it. But how much can we really rely on these nonverbal cues? Aren't they open to interpretation?
While interpretation plays a role, nonverbal cues provide a wealth of information if you know what to look for. Greene encourages us to become, keen observers, attuned to those subtle indicators of true feelings. Microexpressions, tone of voice, body language, even seemingly unrelated symptoms can be revealing.
Can you give us some concrete examples from the book?
Imagine you're talking to someone, and they agree with you verbally, but you catch a fleeting micro-expression of displeasure flash across their face before they mask it with a smile. Or perhaps they roll their eyes while simultaneously nodding in agreement. These subtle contradictions reveal their true feelings despite their efforts to conceal them.
So it's about noticing those inconsistencies between someone's words and their nonverbal cues that can provide valuable insights into their true thoughts and feelings.
Yes, and Greene introduces this fascinating concept called synchrony, the unconscious mirroring of another person's movements and breathing. As two people become more comfortable and connected, their bodies naturally fall into sync. It's a subtle but powerful indicator of growing rapport.
That makes sense. I've definitely noticed that mirroring effect before, especially in conversations where I'm feeling a strong connection with someone.
Now let's shift gears and delve into another fundamental aspect of human nature, our inherent irrationality.
Greene doesn't sugarcoat this. He argues that irrationality is baked into our very being, stemming from our primitive origins and emotional drives. It's not something we can simply reason our way out of.
Precisely. And he highlights several ways this irrationality manifests in our lives. For example, consider the power of group emotions and how easily we can get swept up in viral feelings like outrage or euphoria. We see this play out constantly in social media where emotions can spread like wildfire, often with little regard for facts or logic.
It's like we lose our individual critical thinking when we're caught up in the collective fervor.
Exactly. And this susceptibility to groupthink ties back to our tribal instincts, that deep-seated need to belong, to be part of an us. This tribal mentality can be a powerful force for good, fostering cooperation and solidarity, but it can also lead to prejudice and conflict, dividing people into us versus them.
It seems like this need for belonging is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it connects us, but it can also blind us to the perspectives of those outside our group.
Greene also points out our obsession with status, how we constantly compare ourselves to others, seeking validation and recognition. It's a primal instinct, hardwired into our brains, driving us to climb the social ladder and prove our worth.
It's almost like we're programmed to compete, even when there's no real prize to be won.
Now imagine this innate irrationality amplified under pressure. That's what Green refers to as high-grade irrationality, where emotions intensify, hijacking our ability to think clearly, and leading to impulsive actions. He identifies specific triggers like time pressure or intense competition that push us into this reactive state.
I've definitely experienced that feeling of my brain short-circuiting when the pressure's on. Knowing those triggers can be helpful in recognizing those moments when I need to step back and regain control of my emotions.
Absolutely. Recognizing the signs of high-grade irrationality is the first step towards making more conscious choices. Another crucial insight Green offers is the concept of conviction bias.
This sounds intriguing. What exactly is conviction bias, and how does it affect us?
Conviction bias is the tendency to be more persuaded by people who express their opinions with absolute certainty, even if those opinions are based on, flimsy evidence. Think of a charismatic salesperson or a passionate politician. Their conviction can be contagious, making us more susceptible to their influence, even if our logic tells us to be skeptical.
So it's not just about the content of their message,
Right.
but the way they deliver their conviction becomes a kind of smokescreen, bypassing our critical thinking.
Exactly, and Green argues that understanding this bias is crucial for protecting ourselves from manipulation, especially in a world saturated with information and persuasive tactics. It's about recognizing that passion and conviction don't necessarily equate to truth or accuracy.
Now let's dive into another fascinating aspect of human nature, that Green explores the spectrum of narcissism. It's not just about those extreme cases we see in the headlines. It's a trait that exists in all of us to varying degrees.
Right. Green emphasizes that narcissism isn't inherently bad. In fact, a healthy dose of self-love is essential for well-being and confidence. The key, he argues, is transforming that self-love into empathy, the ability to step outside of our self-absorbed bubble and connect with the experiences of others.
So it's about finding that balance between valuing ourselves and recognizing the needs and perspectives of others. But what about those who fall on the far end of the spectrum, the toxic narcissists? How can we recognize and protect ourselves from these types?
Green provides some valuable insights into the minds of toxic narcissists. These individuals are often masters of manipulation, using charm and charisma to get their needs met. Often at the expense of others, they crave attention, validation, and a constant supply of narcissistic fuel.
But wouldn't that be exhausting, constantly needing to be the center of attention and needing that validation from others?
You'd think so. But toxic narcissists are driven by this deep-seated insecurity and a fragile sense of self-worth. Their manipulative behavior is a way to compensate for those inner vulnerabilities, and they're often blind to the damage they inflict on others because their empathy is severely underdeveloped.
You mentioned manipulation. How do these toxic narcissists typically manipulate others? What should we watch out for?
They might start by showering you with attention and flattery, making you feel special and admired. This is known as love bombing. But once they feel they've secured your loyalty, their behavior can shift dramatically. They might become critical, controlling, or dismissive of your needs.
So it's about recognizing those red flags early on, the inconsistencies between their words and actions, that lack of genuine empathy, and the way they seem to drain the energy from those around them.
Exactly. Maintaining healthy boundaries is crucial when dealing with toxic narcissists. Don't get caught in their web of manipulation or feel obligated to meet their insatiable need for attention.
Green offers some really insightful advice on the art of persuasion. Not through force or coercion, but through understanding and subtly influencing people's motivations. He argues that effective persuasion is less about directly challenging people's opinions and more about lowering their resistance.
Yes, he emphasizes the importance of appealing to people's self-interest.
Yeah.
We all have this desire to feel good about ourselves, to be seen as intelligent, capable, and valuable. So if you can make someone feel those things, you're far more likely to gain their cooperation and influence their decisions.
This reminds me of Green's example of Ernest Shackleton, the Antarctic explorer, who managed to keep his crew's morale high during their incredibly perilous expedition, not by bossing them around, but by demonstrating empathy and understanding.
Shackleton's leadership provides a compelling example of this principle. He recognized that in such extreme circumstances, maintaining morale wasn't about issuing orders, but about connecting with his crew on an emotional level. He appealed to their sense of shared purpose, making them feel valued and essential to the mission's success.
He was a master of reading people, recognizing their individual needs, and adapting his leadership style accordingly. His ability to inspire loyalty and cooperation in such a challenging environment speaks volumes about his understanding of human nature.
Another fascinating example Green uses is the therapist Milton Erickson, renowned for his subtle approach to persuasion. Erickson believed that direct confrontation rarely worked as it tends to trigger defensiveness and resistance.
So instead of challenging people head-on, Erickson took a more indirect route. He used a technique called pacing and leading, where he would mirror the person's language and belief systems, creating a sense of rapport before subtly guiding them towards a new way of thinking.
Precisely, it's a technique that requires deep empathy and observation. But it can be incredibly powerful in situations where direct persuasion would likely backfire.
Green also offers a fascinating perspective on recurring character types, those patterns of behavior we see again and again in the people around us. He identifies several of these types, including the resentful person, the drama magnet, the rigid rationalist, and the passive-aggressive person.
Understanding these character types can be incredibly helpful in navigating your interactions more effectively. It's not about labeling people or putting them in boxes, but rather recognizing those recurring patterns so you can adapt your approach accordingly.
While I see how understanding these types can be helpful, isn't there a risk of oversimplifying people and reducing them to these categories?
That's a valid concern. It's important to remember that these character types are archetypes, not rigid definitions. People are complex and we all exhibit traits from different types at different times, but recognizing those dominant patterns can give you a starting point for understanding someone's motivations and predicting their behavior.
So it's about using those insights as a guide, not a definitive judgment. Let's talk about the resentful person. How does Green describe this type and how can we best interact with them?
The resentful person is chronically feeling wronged, holding on to grudges, and blaming others for their misfortunes. They see the world through a lens of victimhood, and their negativity can be contagious. Green suggests that the best way to deal with this type is to avoid getting sucked into their drama and to set clear boundaries. Don't try to reason with them or change their perspective. It's a futile effort.
That makes sense. What about the drama magnet? These types can be incredibly draining to be around, can't they?
They can indeed. The drama magnet thrives on conflict and attention, always positioning themselves as the victim. They create chaos wherever they go, feeding off the emotional reactions of others. Green advises setting firm boundaries with this type and refusing to get caught up in their whirlwind of drama.
And what about the rigid rationalist? I've definitely encountered this type before. They can be so frustrating to deal with because they seem completely closed off to any perspective that doesn't fit into their logical framework.
The rigid rationalist is overly analytical, uncomfortable with ambiguity, and quick to dismiss anything that seems irrational or emotional. While their logical thinking can be an asset in some situations, their inflexibility can blind them to other perspectives and make them difficult to collaborate with. Green suggests appealing to their need for logic and evidence, presenting your arguments in a clear and structured way.
So it's about meeting them on their own terms, speaking your language, and finding common ground. What about the passive-aggressive person? How does Green suggest navigating those tricky interactions?
The passive-aggressive person avoids direct confrontation, but expresses their hostility through subtle sabotage, backhanded compliments, and a general air of, "I'm fine, everything's fine," while secretly plotting your demise.
I've known a few people like that, and it can be so frustrating trying to decipher their true intentions. They never say what they really mean.
Green advises against engaging in their games and trying to get them to admit their true feelings. Instead, focus on setting clear boundaries and communicating your expectations directly, and don't expect a direct apology when they inevitably undermine you. It's not going to happen.
So it's about recognizing their tactics and protecting yourself from their subtle manipulations. Now, Green also offers some intriguing insights into generational dynamics, the natural tension that arises between generations as the younger ones challenge the norms and values of their elders.
Yes, Green argues that this tension is a recurring pattern throughout history, not necessarily a bad thing, but a natural part of the cycle of societal change. Younger generations bring new ideas, challenge outdated ways of thinking, and push for progress, while older generations often cling to tradition and resist change.
It's that classic push and pull between the old and the new, each generation reacting against the previous one. We see it in fashion, music, politics, and really every aspect of culture.
Yeah. Green suggests that this generational clash is hardwired into our nature, perhaps stemming from our tribal past, where younger members had to challenge the dominance of the elders to gain their own power and status within the group.
That makes sense. It's like a natural cycle of renewal and innovation, each generation bringing its unique perspective and pushing society forward, even if that progress comes with some friction.
He emphasizes that understanding these generational dynamics is crucial for navigating our interactions with people from different age groups. It's about recognizing that those differing perspectives often stem from lived experiences and cultural contexts that have shaped their worldviews.
So it's about empathy, understanding, and finding that common ground, even when there are generational divides. Now, let's delve into one of the most profound and perhaps unexpected themes in Green's book, the power of embracing our mortality.
While it might seem counterintuitive, Green argues that acknowledging our mortality, not in a morbid way, but in a way that enhances our appreciation for life, can be incredibly liberating.
I can see how that might be true, but it's also a bit unsettling to think about, isn't it?
It can be, but Green suggests that our denial of death actually distorts our relationship with time, making us procrastinate and waste precious energy on things that ultimately don't matter. By accepting the fact that our time is finite, we gain a sense of urgency and clarity, focusing our attention on what truly matters.
It's like that saying, live each day as if it were your last. But with a more grounded, practical approach. It's not about living recklessly, but about making conscious choices that align with our values and using our time wisely.
Green uses the powerful analogy of the writer Flannery O'Connor, who, facing a terminal illness, used her limited time to focus intensely on her writing, producing some of her most powerful work in those final years. Her awareness of death wasn't a source of despair, but rather a catalyst for a heightened sense of purpose and creativity.
That's an incredibly inspiring example. It shows how embracing our mortality, however uncomfortable it might be, can actually fuel our passions and motivate us to live more fully in the present moment.
Precisely, now shifting gears a bit. Green also delves into the realm of history, not just as a collection of dates and events, but as a tapestry woven with recurring patterns of human behavior. He argues that understanding these patterns can give us incredible insights into the present and help us anticipate the future.
I love this idea. It's like we can learn from the mistakes and successes of those who came before us. By recognizing those recurring patterns, we can gain a deeper understanding of the forces shaping our own societies. But history can feel so vast and overwhelming. Where do we even begin to look for these patterns? What are some of the key historical patterns that Green highlights?
One of the most fascinating patterns he explores is the cyclical nature of civilizations. He argues that societies tend to go through periods of growth, expansion, and ultimately decline and collapse. This pattern has played out countless times throughout history, from the Roman Empire to the Mayan civilization, and while the specific circumstances might differ, there are underlying dynamics that seem to repeat themselves.
So it's like history is a giant laboratory where we can observe these experiments in human behavior playing out on a grand scale. And by studying those experiments, we can learn valuable lessons about the forces that shape our own societies. But how can we actually apply this knowledge in our own lives? It can feel overwhelming to think about these grand historical patterns when you're just trying to get through your to-do list.
It starts with recognizing that you're not just living in a vacuum. Your life is unfolding within a larger historical context shaped by the forces of the past and the trends of the present. By understanding those forces, you can make more informed decisions, anticipate potential challenges, and navigate the complexities of your world with greater clarity and purpose.
So it's about developing a historical consciousness, a sense of how my own life is connected to this larger tapestry of human experience. But let's bring it down to a more personal level. What about those recurring patterns we see in our own individual lives? Are we destined to repeat the same mistakes over and over again?
Green argues that we all have this set character shaped by our early experiences and genetic predispositions, and this character, often operating beneath our conscious awareness, compels us to repeat certain patterns of behavior, particularly in how we react to challenges and make decisions.
So it's like we have these ingrained tendencies that can make us trip up in the same ways, even when we're trying our best to learn from our mistakes. But if our character is so set, does that mean we're doomed to repeat those patterns forever? Is there any hope for change?
Green doesn't believe we're simply puppets of our past. He suggests that by becoming aware of these patterns, consciously examining our own behavior and motivations, we can start to break free from these self-destructive loops and make more deliberate choices that lead to greater growth and fulfillment. It's not easy, but self-awareness is the first step towards change.
It's like we have to become archaeologists of our own lives, digging into our past to uncover those hidden patterns, and then using that knowledge to create a better future. Yeah. But this brings up another interesting point. If our personal lives are shaped by these recurring patterns, what about the larger world? Are there patterns in history that might give us clues about what's to come?
Green argues that history is full of rhymes, not exact repetitions, but echoes of the past that can inform our understanding of the present and future. He suggests looking for those rhymes, those recurring dynamics that have played out in different contexts throughout history, to gain a deeper understanding of the forces at play in our own world.
So it's like we're detectives looking for clues, those recurring themes that can help us decipher the code of human behavior and anticipate what might lie ahead. But how can we avoid feeling overwhelmed by all this information? It can be daunting to try to connect the dots between our personal lives, the patterns in history, and the complexities of the world around us.
It's about finding the right balance. Green encourages us to cultivate a skeptical yet curious mind, one that questions assumptions, scrutinizes evidence, and remains open to new ideas and perspectives. He also stresses the importance of studying history not as a dry collection of dates and facts, but as a living narrative that reveals the timeless truth of human nature.
And it's not just about absorbing information passively, it's about actively engaging with it, thinking critically, and applying those insights to make better decisions, build stronger relationships, and ultimately create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Exactly. In the final part of this deep dive, we'll explore how to synthesize all of this knowledge into practical strategies for navigating your world with greater awareness, wisdom, and purpose.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature. We've explored the hidden forces shaping our behavior, from those shadowy impulses to those patterns that echo through history. Now, how can we use this knowledge to navigate our own lives with greater purpose and skill?
One of the most empowering takeaways from this deep dive is the emphasis on self-awareness. It's not just about introspection, but it's about recognizing how your actions and even your presence impact others.
That leads us to Greene's insights on the law of authority. He argues that true authority isn't about demanding respect. It's about cultivating a presence that inspires confidence and trust. It sounds like a subtle but powerful distinction.
Exactly. Authority isn't something you're born with. It's a skill you can develop through self-awareness and practice.
Greene provides some specific strategies for cultivating that aura of authority, doesn't he? I'm particularly intrigued by his emphasis on emotional mastery.
He does. Mastering your emotions, especially under pressure, is crucial. People are instinctively drawn to those who appear calm and in control, especially in moments of crisis. Think of those leaders who radiate a sense of stability amidst chaos. It's magnetic.
That makes sense. When someone seems unflappable in the face of challenges, it naturally inspires confidence.
Yeah.
What are some other ways to cultivate that aura of authority?
Greene highlights the importance of being decisive. It's not about making rash decisions, but rather demonstrating that you've carefully considered your options and are willing to take action. People lose faith in leaders who seem hesitant or indecisive, particularly when tough choices need to be made.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between thoughtful consideration and decisive action. That reminds me of what we discussed about high-grade irrationality. When we're under pressure, our emotions can hijack our decision-making. It seems like cultivating that emotional mastery is essential for avoiding those impulsive actions we might later regret.
Absolutely. Remember, those triggers like time pressure or intense competition can push us into that reactive state. Recognizing those triggers and consciously choosing to step back and regain control of our emotions is crucial for effective leadership, both in our personal lives and in any professional roles we might have.
Greene also emphasizes the importance of listening to others, not just waiting for our turn to speak, but genuinely engaging with what they're saying and making them feel heard. It's about respecting their perspectives, even if we don't agree with them.
Yes, true leaders make those around them feel valued and included. Greene also cautions against overpromising and underdelivering. It's easy to get caught up in the enthusiasm of a new project and make grand promises. But remember, actions speak louder than words.
It's about building a reputation for reliability, for following through on those commitments, and for being someone people can count on. We've discussed self-awareness and cultivating authority. What other practical takeaways can we glean from this deep dive?
Remember our exploration of nonverbal cues? Greene stresses the importance of not only reading those cues in others, but also being aware of the signals we send through our own body language and tone of voice.
We're constantly communicating even when we're not saying a word, and those nonverbal signals can either enhance our message or completely undermine it.
Exactly. Pay attention to how you present yourself, especially in those critical first impressions. Greene offers specific tips on projecting confidence and warmth through nonverbal communication, maintaining eye contact, using open and expansive gestures, even mirroring the other person's body language can help build rapport and create a sense of connection.
This connects back to what we learned about empathy, stepping outside of our own perspectives and understanding how the other person is feeling.
Yes, the more we connect with others on an emotional level, the more effective we'll be in communicating and influencing them. Remember, everyone has their own insecurities and sensitivities. Learning to recognize and avoid triggering those sensitivities can significantly improve your interactions.
So it's not about manipulating people or exploiting their weaknesses, but rather being sensitive to their needs and communicating in a way that makes them feel respected, That brings us back to those recurring character types. Understanding those patterns can be incredibly helpful in navigating our relationships.
It's about becoming a student of human nature, paying attention to the people around you, and developing those social intelligence skills that allow you to navigate the complexities of human interactions with greater grace and effectiveness.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We've explored those hidden forces shaping our behavior, the patterns that echo through history, and those strategies we can use to navigate this complex world with greater skill.
As you move forward, pay attention to the patterns you notice in yourself, and in others, use this knowledge to strengthen your relationships, make more informed decisions, and find those deeper sources of meaning and purpose that will enrich your journey.
And never stop exploring. The world is a fascinating place full of wonder and mystery. Keep that curious mind engaged, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the depths of human nature.